My mother has always had a gift for making me feel like a guest in my own family, not a welcome one. When I was 9, she forgot to pick me up from soccer practice, twice, in the same week. My older brother's lacrosse games, though, those she never missed. She sat front row, wearing his school colors, screaming herself hoarse. I stood outside the soccer field for 45 minutes in the rain, until the assistant coach finally drove me home. My mother apologized, sort of. She said she'd lost track. She never lost track of anything that mattered to her. I learned early that I didn't make that list. By the time I was in high school, I had stopped expecting much. I did well in school, very well, actually. But that wasn't the currency my family traded in. My brother was charming, athletic, loud in all the ways my father admired. I was quiet. I read too much. I asked questions that made my father uncomfortable at the dinner table, and my mother changed the subject. My aunt once told me I had too much going on behind my eyes. She meant it as a criticism. I took it as the best compliment I ever received from that side of the family. I left for college on a full academic scholarship to Northwestern. My parents came to move-in day. My father shook the RE's hand and talked about my brother's upcoming college visits for most of the 20 minutes they were in my dorm room. My mother straightened my comforter twice and said the room was smaller than she expected. Then they drove back to Connecticut and I stood at the window and watched their car disappear, and I hate that this is the honest answer, relieved. I studied pre-law, then law. Then I clerked for a federal circuit judge in Chicago for 2 years, which is an honor most law students only dream about. I never told my family exactly what that meant. I mentioned it once at Thanksgiving, and my father nodded the way he nodded when he wanted to seem interested without actually listening. My mother asked if I was still doing the lawyer thing or if I'd thought about something more stable. I became a federal prosecutor. My family knew I worked for the government. That was the extent of their curiosity. I didn't correct them. I'd stopped needing their understanding somewhere around my second year of law school. I had colleagues who respected me, a mentor who pushed me, and a record I was proud of. I worked financial crimes and public corruption. I put people in prison who thought their money made them untouchable. I was good at my job in a way that was quiet and thorough and completely invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. My family did not know what to look for. The wedding was my cousin Philip's. He was marrying a woman named Adrian, and the ceremony was in Charleston, South Carolina, a destination wedding at a historic plantation venue that Adrian's family had rented out for the weekend. It was the kind of event my family treated like a royal occasion. My mother had been talking about it for 8 months. She'd bought a new dress in April for a November wedding. I flew in from Chicago. I'd been in the middle of a grand jury proceeding that I couldn't fully step away from. So I arrived the morning of the rehearsal dinner later than everyone else. I came directly from O'Hare in the clothes I traveled in. Dark slacks, a blazer, a carry-on I'd packed in 11 minutes. I had not slept properly in 4 days. My family was already gathered at the hotel when I arrived. The lobby was enormous and chandelier lit, and I spotted them immediately near the concierge desk. My parents, my brother and his wife, 2 aunts, an uncle, Philip's parents. An uncle, Philip's parents. My mother was holding a flute of something sparkling even though it was barely noon. She looked at me the way she always looked at me when she was about to say something she thought was helpful. "Oh, sweetheart." She reached out and touched my sleeve. "You look exhausted. And that blazer." She glanced at my aunt. "We're going to a rehearsal dinner tonight, not a deposition." My aunt laughed. My uncle found something interesting to look at on the ceiling. My father clapped my brother on the shoulder. They'd apparently been in the middle of a conversation about his firm, where my brother had just made partner, and barely looked at me. "Good you made it," he said, in the tone of someone noting that the mail had arrived. I checked in. I went upstairs. I changed into something my mother would find acceptable. I came back down. The afternoon was what family gatherings always are when you've been the afterthought long enough to stop being surprised by it. My brother held court at the poolside table. His wife showed photos of their new house. 4 bedrooms, finished basement, the good school district. My mother asked me if I was seeing anyone seriously, with the specific emphasis on seriously that implied my previous answer had been insufficient. My father and uncle talked about the market, about property values in Fairfield County, about a golf trip they were planning. At some point, Philip's father, my uncle Raymond, made a toast. He talked about Philip's success in real estate development, how proud the family was, how Adrian was exactly the kind of woman who elevates a man. He looked around the table and said something about the next generation carrying the family name with distinction. His eyes didn't land on me once during that speech. I drank my water. I smiled when it was appropriate. I had spent years learning how to be in this family without needing anything from them. I was good at it by now. What I was not prepared for was what happened at the restaurant that night. The rehearsal dinner was at a private room in a restaurant downtown. Beautiful space, white tablecloths, the kind of place where the menus don't have prices. My family arrived together and was shown to a long table. I sat near the end, next to my cousin Felicity, who was 17 and on her phone, and therefore the most comfortable company at the table. About 20 minutes in, my mother leaned across 2 seats and said to me, in a voice she clearly believed was a whisper, "You know, Raymond offered to seat you at the secondary table with the vendors and the wedding coordinator. I told him you'd prefer to be with family, but honestly, sweetheart, sometimes I wonder if we set you up for disappointment by including you in these things." I looked at her. She had the expression of someone who believed they were being kind. "You've always been a little separate," she said. "Even as a child. You never really fit the same way your brother does. And I think you know that. I just don't want tonight to be uncomfortable for you." Felicity had gone very still next to me. Even she, at 17, understood what had just been said. I put my fork down. I folded my napkin, and I said calmly, "I appreciate your concern." My mother nodded, satisfied, and turned back to her conversation. My brother had heard. He gave me a look that was almost sympathetic, except sympathy requires you to actually feel something on behalf of another person, and my brother had never quite managed that where I was concerned. He shrugged, almost imperceptibly, and went back to talking about his firm. I did not sleep well that night. The wedding was the following afternoon, and the morning was supposed to be relaxed. Family brunch, some downtime, photos before the ceremony. I had gotten up early, gone for a walk along the waterfront, and called my supervisor back in Chicago because there was a filing deadline I needed to confirm. When I returned to the hotel, I was standing at the elevator when my phone rang. It was my colleague Theo. Theo didn't work in my office. Theo worked in Washington. "I know you're at a family thing," he said, "but I need 20 minutes. The Kellerman matter just broke open and the AG wants a call this afternoon. You're the only one who has the full picture on the wire authorization." I told him I'd be available. We worked out a time. I hung up. My father was standing 10 feet away. He'd come out of the breakfast room and apparently heard most of that. "Work call?" he said. "Yes. On a Saturday. At a wedding." "It's a complex case," I said. He did the thing he'd always done, which was look at me with a particular kind of tolerance, like I was explaining something he found mildly interesting but not really relevant. "You know," he said, "your brother takes time off. He knows how to separate. It's important for your mental health. People at your level, government attorneys, whatever, you tend to burn out. You need to learn to be present. My level." I looked at him for a moment. He was wearing a very nice blazer. He had a Bloody Mary in his hand at 10:40 in the morning. He was explaining work-life balance to me at a moment when I was in the middle of coordinating a federal case that had taken 3 years to build. "You're right," I said. "I'll work on that." He nodded and went back to the breakfast room. I stood at the elevator and pressed the button and waited. The ceremony was lovely. Adrian was beautiful. Philip cried a little, which was unexpectedly moving. I sat in the third row on the family side and held my program and watched 2 people begin their lives together and felt, briefly, something uncomplicated. Happiness for them. Just that, simple and clean. The reception was at the venue's main hall, high ceilings, long tables, a band setting up near the dance floor. My family had a reserved section. I was seated between a great aunt who was hard of hearing and a second cousin I'd met twice. My mother was at the main family table, closer to the head. She had arranged the seating. Dinner progressed. Toasts were made. The band started. My mother danced with my father, then with my brother, then with Raymond. I watched and ate my salmon and talked to my great aunts about her garden, which she could discuss at length and with genuine feeling, and I found it genuinely restful. Then my brother came over. He sat down in the empty chair beside me, drink in hand, with the loose ease of a man who had been successful long enough to be comfortable everywhere. "So," he said, "the Kellerman thing. That's DOJ?" I looked at him. You know I can't discuss open matters. I'm not asking for details. He swirled his glass. I know some people in that space. Real estate development, you run into all kinds. He paused. If you ever need context on the financial structures, how these things are set up, I could be useful to you. I understood exactly what he was saying. I appreciate that, I said. But no. He leaned back. His expression shifted, just slightly, into something cooler. You've always been like this, he said. You know that? Even when we were kids. You'd never let anyone help you. You'd rather struggle alone than accept anything from the family. I don't struggle, I said. Government salary, shared apartment in Chicago, no. He gestured vaguely. You know what I mean. You could have gone private sector. Dad knows 3 managing partners who would have taken your call. But you wanted to do it your way. I did, I said. And look where it got you. He said it without cruelty, that almost made it worse. The flat, factual delivery, as if it were simply an observation. You're 32 and you're eating salmon alone at your cousin's wedding, while I'm. He stopped himself. Smiled. I just think you made it harder than it needed to be. I thought about a lot of things in that moment. I thought about 3 years and 47 witnesses and 1,700 pages of financial records. I thought about the morning I stood in a federal courtroom and watched a man who had stolen $60 million from public pension funds go white in the face when the jury foreman stood up. I thought about what it costs to build a case that really holds, against people who have spent their entire lives believing that money is a kind of armor. I thought about my brother offering to introduce me to his real estate contacts while I was in the middle of investigating a case that, if he read the financial press more carefully, he might have recognized. I said, "You're probably right." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to the dance floor. I finished my salmon. My phone buzzed at 9:43. I'd stepped out onto the venue's side terrace. The night air was cool, the kind of clear southern evening that smells like jasmine and cut grass, and I answered. It was Theo again. But this time there was someone else on the line. I have the Attorney General on for you, Theo said. She wanted to speak directly. I straightened without thinking about it. Old reflex. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. She had questions about the scope of our wire authorization, about one specific financial entity in the Kellerman structure, about a timeline that had implications for a parallel investigation in the Southern District of New York. I answered everything. At the end, she said, I want you on the call Monday morning. 8 a.m., you'll present directly to the task force. Yes, ma'am, I said. Good work, she said. This one matters. The call ended. I stood on the terrace for a moment. The music was still playing inside. Through the tall windows, I could see the shapes of my family dancing. My mother, my father, my brother with his arm around his wife. I went back inside. My mother found me near the dessert table about 20 minutes later. She had a look on her face that meant she'd seen me on the phone on the terrace. You really cannot turn it off, can you? She said. It wasn't quite a question. It was important, I said. Everything is always important to you. She picked up a small plate. Your brother managed to be fully present tonight. He didn't take a single call. No, I agreed. She looked at me for a moment. I have known my mother's face my entire life. The specific set of her mouth when she's decided something. The way her eyes go slightly distant when she's composing what she'll say, rather than actually looking at you. I love you, she said. You know that. But I think you've chosen a life that makes you unavailable to the people who matter. And I don't know if you understand yet what that costs. I looked at her. She meant it kindly. That was the thing. She genuinely believed she was offering me something. I think about costs differently than you do, I said. She tilted her head, a little puzzled. Before she could respond, I saw Felicity across the room making frantic eye contact with me. She pointed, subtly, with her chin, at the entrance to the hall. There were 2 people standing there who had not been at this wedding. One of them was Theo. He was in a suit that meant he'd come from somewhere official. The other was a woman I recognized. One of our investigators, Priya, who I had last seen in my Chicago office 40 hours ago. They were looking for me. I set down my dessert plate. I said, "Excuse me," to my mother. And I crossed the reception hall and I was aware, without looking, that my brother had seen them too, and that my father had, and that there was a kind of ripple of attention following me as I walked. Theo met me at the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said. Low and quick. "I know. But it moved faster than we expected. The SDNY piece. There's an emergency sealing motion and the judge wants a response by Monday, 6 a.m. If we don't get ahead of it tonight, we lose the parallel track entirely." Priya had a document case. She handed it to me. "I need a room," I said. "Hotel has a business center," Theo said. We called ahead. I opened the document case and looked at the top filing. Behind me, I could hear the band, the murmur of the reception, my cousin's laughter from somewhere near the dance floor. "Give me 10 minutes," I said. I turned back. My mother, my father, my brother, they were all watching from different parts of the room, each with a different expression. My father looked confused. My brother looked, for the first time I could remember, uncertain. My mother's hand had stopped halfway to her mouth. I walked back to the table where I'd left my things. I picked up my small clutch, my phone. Felicity caught my eye and gave me a look that contained multitudes. I looked at my family one more time. It wasn't triumph I felt. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't the satisfaction of a scene from a movie where everything resolves neatly and the person who was dismissed gets to watch the room understand what they never saw. What I felt was quieter than that. It was the particular stillness of a person who has built something real and solid and knows exactly what it took to build it, standing in a room full of people who will now spend the rest of the evening trying to recalibrate everything they assumed. I had work to do. "I'm sorry," I said to my father, because I meant it, actually, in the complicated way you can mean something without it changing anything. "I need to step out for a bit." He opened his mouth. "Closed it," my brother said. "Is that DOJ? Are those, I can't discuss it." I said, "DOJ? Are those, I can't discuss it," I said. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." I walked out with Theo and Priya, and the heavy doors closed behind us, and the music went quiet, and the three of us moved down the corridor toward the elevator, and I was already reading the top page of the filing, already thinking about the judge's likely concerns, already mapping the argument I'd need to make by morning. Behind me, through the closed doors, I could still hear the band. They were playing something slow and lovely. I let it fade. My mother called me the following Tuesday. That was unusual. She normally waited for me to call her, a dynamic we'd maintained for years without ever acknowledging it. "Your father looked you up," she said. "Online. After the wedding. He found there was a press release. From the Department of Justice. About the Kellerman case." A pause. "It has your name on it, your title." I waited. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" she asked. And her voice was different. Not the voice she used when she was managing me, or pitying me, or making careful assessments of where I fit in the family architecture. It was smaller than that, genuinely confused. "You never asked," I said. Gently, because that was the truth and I wasn't angry anymore, not really. You can only stay angry at people for things they were never going to understand, and at some point the anger just becomes a weight you're carrying alone. "We assumed." She stopped. "We thought." "I know," I said. There was a long silence. "The Attorney General," she said finally. "You spoke to the actual, yes." Another silence. "Your brother's wife told him you should have led with that," she said. "He told her that's not how you work." I wasn't sure if that was an apology or an observation. With my family, sometimes those were the same thing. "Mom," I said, "I have a meeting in 15 minutes. "Of course," she said quickly. "Of course, go. She stopped again. "I'm proud of you. I want you to know that. I should have. I know I should have said it more." I sat with that for a moment. The thing about words that come late is they're still words. They still mean something. They just mean something different than they would have meant at the right time, in the right place, when you were 9 years old standing in the rain outside a soccer field, wondering if anyone was coming. But they still mean something. "Thank you," I said, and I meant that too. We hung up. I put my phone down and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, gray and cold and vast. And I thought about all the years I'd spent becoming someone in a world that had no idea I existed. And I thought about how that had always been enough. The work itself, the work being real, The work meaning something regardless of who saw it. The pride was always mine. I just didn't need anyone else to hand it to me anymore. I picked up my coffee. I opened the filing. I went back to work. I've thought a lot about what my mother said on that phone call. Not the apology part, though I've thought about that too, but the question underneath it. Why didn't you ever tell us? As if the telling was something I owed them. As if my life was a secret I've been keeping out of stubbornness rather than self-preservation. The truth is simpler than that and harder. I stopped telling them because telling them never changed anything. I told my father about Northwestern and he talked about my brother's lacrosse. I told my mother about my clerkship and she asked if I was seeing anyone. At a certain point, you understand that some audiences aren't listening and you stop performing for them. Not out of bitterness, just out of a basic respect for your own time and energy. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand most things that matter, is that the people who dismiss you are usually working from very old information. My parents built their picture of me sometime around when I was 12, and they never really updated it. I was the quiet one, the difficult one, the one who didn't fit the mold. And because they stopped looking closely, they missed everything that came after. They missed the years of work. They missed the cases. They missed the person I was becoming while they were busy being proud of someone else. That's not a tragedy. It's just a pattern, and patterns can be understood even when they can't be fixed. What I know about the work I do, the real work, the kind that takes years and leaves no room for shortcuts, is that it requires a particular kind of faith. Not in other people, not in recognition. Faith in the thing itself. You have to believe that building something carefully and honestly has value regardless of who sees it. Because most of the time, nobody sees it. You sit with 47 witness interviews and 1,700 pages of financial records, and you know in your bones that this matters, even on the days when it feels invisible. My brother thought I'd made my life harder than it needed to be. And in a narrow sense, he was right. I could have taken the easy path. I could have called my father's contacts, gone private sector, made more money, lived a life my family would have found legible and impressive. But I would have been doing it for them, not for me, and I knew the difference between those two things even when I was too young to articulate it. The life I built is mine in a way that nothing handed to me ever would have been. My mother said she was proud of me. I believed her, and I also understood that pride is not the same thing as having paid attention. What I felt, hearing it, was not the relief of finally being seen. It was something quieter. The recognition that she was trying and that trying late is still trying, and that I could hold both things at once, the years of absence and this small, genuine moment. People are complicated. Families are more complicated. Families are more complicated. Grace is not the same as forgetting. You can extend it freely and still know exactly what happened. I picked up my coffee. I went back to work. That's what I always do. The work was there before they understood it, and it will be there long after the conversation fades. That's the only thing I've ever needed it to be.